Welcome to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving headfirst into a mystery that honestly feels like it's straight out of an adventure movie.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about the baffling case of D.B. Cooper.
Right, D.B. Cooper. Forget what you think you know, because this is a wild story. Skyjacking, a bag full of cash.
And a disappearance that has, well, stumped the FBI for decades now.
So set the scene for us. When did this all kick off?
Okay, picture this. It's Thanksgiving Eve, 1971. A man walks up to the counter at Portland Airport.
Just a regular guy.
Seems like it. Calls himself Dan Cooper. That's the name he used, though it later got misreported as D.B. Cooper, and that name stuck.
Ah, okay, so Dan Cooper.
Right. He buys a one-way ticket. Cash. For Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, heading to Seattle.
Description, what did he look like?
Witnesses said white male, mid-40s, pretty nondescript, really.
Mm-hmm.
Dressed in a business suit, carrying a briefcase. Standard stuff.
But this flight, Flight 305, it wasn't just any flight, was it?
No, definitely not. This was the beginning of, well, one of the most audacious and still totally unsolved crimes in aviation history.
So our mission today in this deep dive is to really explore the known facts, look at the clues.
And tackle those lingering questions about this legendary figure, what really happened.
We'll unpack that flight, the investigation, try to figure out why this story is just so captivating. Get ready for some twists.
Definitely some aha moments, or maybe more moments.
Okay, let's start with the hijacking itself. You said he seemed calm buying the ticket.
Yeah, very calm, paid cash, nothing suspicious at that point. He boards the plane, takes his seat.
And then, when does it start?
Shortly after takeoff, he hands a note to a flight attendant, Florence Schaffner.
Just passes her a note. What does she think it was?
Initially, she probably thought, maybe a phone number, a business card, something like that. She tucked it away.
Oh, so she didn't read it right away.
No, but he leaned over and quietly told her she should look at it. Said something like, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb."
Wow. Okay. That changes things.
Drastically. The note basically confirmed it. He claimed he had a bomb in his briefcase.
Did she see it? The bomb?
He actually showed it to her briefly. She sat next to him, as instructed in the note, and he opened the briefcase just enough for her to see.
And what did she see?
She described 2 rows of 4 red cylinders, looks like dynamite sticks, connected by wires, and a large cylindrical battery. It looked convincing.
Chilling. So what were his demands? What did he want?
He was very specific. $200,000.
A lot of money back then.
A huge sum. And crucially, he specified negotiable American currency, unmarked bills.
Okay, the money. What else?
Parachutes. And he wanted everything delivered by 5:00 p.m.
4 parachutes, not just one for himself.
Exactly. 2 main parachutes, 2 reserve parachutes, 2 front, 2 back. That detail immediately made the authorities think.
Why? What does that imply?
Well, it suggests maybe he wasn't planning to jump alone. Or maybe it was a bluff, a way to make sure they didn't sabotage the chutes, assuming he wouldn't know which one he'd end up using.
Clever. Or maybe just cautious.
It definitely added a layer of complexity. So while this is happening, another flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, becomes the main liaison.
She's talking to him directly.
Yes, relaying messages back and forth to the cockpit and eventually to the ground. And reports say Cooper remained pretty calm throughout this.
While the plane is just circled.
2 hours, yeah. Flight 305 circled Puget Sound. Down below, absolute frantic activity, gathering the cash, finding the parachute.
And the FBI, what were they doing?
They were scrambling, but also thinking ahead. They managed to photograph all the $20 bills.
Smart. Get the serial numbers.
Yep, mostly started with the letter L. That would become important later, maybe.
Any other interactions on the plane during this time?
There was one odd moment. A passenger, described later as the cowboy, apparently kept bothering one of the flight attendants about the delay.
Just being impatient.
Yeah, and Cooper, who had apparently been watching, got irritated. Told the guy pretty curtly to sit down.
Shows he was focused, in control.
Very much so. No nonsense. Eventually, the ransom and parachutes were ready.
So they land.
They land back at Seattle-Tacoma Airport. The money arrives, 19 pounds of it, in a bag from Seattle First National Bank.
19 pounds of cash. And the parachutes.
They were sourced from a local skydiving school, and one apparently came from a stunt pilot. Kind of a mixed bag.
Okay, so he has the money, he has the chutes. What next?
He keeps his word, partially. He allows all 36 passengers to deplane in Seattle.
Must have been immense relief for them.
Unimaginable. But the crew wasn't off the hook yet. 3 flight attendants, including Mucklow and the flight crew, remained.
And Cooper, what's he doing?
He inspects the money.
Carefully.
He actually seemed a bit annoyed. It wasn't in a knapsack like he might have asked for, just a cloth bank bag.
So what did he do?
This is interesting. He took out a knife and cut the canopy away from one of the reserve parachutes.
Why?
The thinking is maybe to use the lines or even the fabric itself to make a more secure bundle for the cash, maybe tied to himself.
Okay, resourceful? Then what?
He then released 2 of the 3 flight attendants. Just Keenan Mucklow stayed with him in the main cabin, plus the cockpit crew.
Did he seem to know how to use the parachutes?
Well, they gave him printed instructions for the chutes, but he apparently brushed them off, said something like, "I don't need those."
Confident. Or maybe bluffing again.
Hard to say. Then there was another delay. Refueling. More tension building.
Right. He needed fuel to get wherever he was going next.
Exactly. He wanted them to fly towards Mexico City initially, but they negotiated a fuel stop in Reno, Nevada.
Okay, so Reno is the next destination.
Yes. Finally, the plane takes off again.
Uh-huh.
Cooper, Tina Mucklow, the pilot, co-pilot, and flight engineer on board. Destination, Reno.
And this time, they weren't entirely alone in the sky, right?
No. Unknown to Cooper, the Air Force was tracking them. 2 F-106 fighter jets and a T-33 trainer were scrambled to follow, keeping their distance.
Trying to watch without being seen.
Pretty much. So once they're airborne again, heading south, Cooper gives Tina Mucklow another instruction. He tells her to go to the back of the plane and lower the aft staircase.
The staircase? In midair, can you even do that?
On a Boeing 727, yes. It wasn't common knowledge, but it was possible. Mucklow was, understandably, terrified. She was worried about being sucked out.
I would be too. Did she do it?
Cooper seemed to understand the mechanics. He told her he'd handle lowering it, but didn't want her or anyone else back there with him.
Oh.
Stay in the cockpit, essentially.
So she goes back to the front.
Yes. And as she's leaving the main cabin, she takes one last look back. That's the last time anyone saw D.B. Cooper.
What did she see?
She saw him in the aisle, fiddling with something around his waist. Looked like he was tying that money bag securely to himself.
Getting ready.
Seems like it. A few minutes later, maybe around 8 p.m.,
Yeah.
a warning light flashes in the cockpit. Aft staircase deployed.
So he did it. He opened the stairs.
Yep. The captain gets on the intercom, asks Cooper if he needs assistance.
And Cooper's reply?
Just one word.
No.
Chilling. Just no. And then, very shortly after that, the pilots felt a sudden change in air pressure, and the tail section of the aircraft pitched upwards momentarily.
The jump.
That's the moment. They believe that's precisely when Cooper jumped out of the back of that 727 into the freezing, rainy night sky somewhere over southwestern Washington state.
And when they landed in Reno?
They landed with that aft staircase still deployed, dragging on the runway. They searched the plane. Cooper was gone.
Just
vanished.
Into thin air, along with the money and 2 of the parachutes.
So begins the manhunt and the mystery. Where do you even start looking?
That was the immediate massive problem, pinpointing the landing zone.
Why so hard? They knew the flight path.
Yes, but think about the variables. The exact time he jumped wasn't known, only estimated. Wind speed and direction at altitude, his rate of descent, whether he opened the chute immediately or delayed.
All unknowns.
Huge unknowns. And it was a dark, stormy night. Visibility was terrible. The fighter jets following saw nothing. No parachute, no figure, nothing.
So what did the FBI do? They launched a massive search, one of the biggest, most expensive in their history up to that point. Initially focused on an area calculated based on the flight path and the likely jump time.
Where was that?
Roughly near Mount St. Helens, Lake Merwin area in southwest Washington. They even used, get this, an SR-71 Blackbird spy plane.
A Blackbird? Wow. To do what?
To fly the same route, hoping its advanced sensors could spot something, a parachute, disturbed ground, anything.
Did it work?
Nope, nothing. They also did experiments. Dropped weights from a 727's aft stairs to see how the plane reacted, confirming that upward pitch the pilots felt.
And ground searches?
Oh yeah, huge ground searches. Hundreds of soldiers, FBI agents, local police, volunteers combing the forests. Rough terrain.
Did they find anything at all?
Well, not related to Cooper. They went door to door, searched farms, even dredged parts of Lake Merwin. They did find a skeleton at one point.
Cooper?
No, unfortunately not. Turned out to be unrelated. A teenager who'd gone missing earlier. Just highlights how vast and unforgiving that wilderness is.
So the initial search zone was maybe wrong.
Over time, they refined the estimate. Using slightly different data from the plane, like wind measurements recorded by the pilot, Tom Bohan, They thought the drop zone might have been further east,
Closer to where?
maybe near the Washougal River watershed. But then another major event complicated things further.
What was that?
Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980.
Ah, right, in that potential area.
Exactly. The FBI later conceded that if any remains or evidence were in that revised zone, the eruption likely buried or obliterated them forever.
Just incredibly bad luck for the investigation. Speaking of which, we should probably remind everyone listening to tell me more.
Oh, right. If you're finding this mystery as fascinating as we do,
Make sure you hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss our future deep dives into other incredible stories.
definitely, there's always more to uncover. Okay, back to the investigation.
They had the serial numbers for the cash, right? Did any of that ever turn up?
For almost a decade, nothing. They released the numbers. Northwest Orient offered a big reward, $25,000 initially, I think. Silence. Until February 1980, almost 9 years later. An 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram is on vacation with his family, digging in the sand on the banks of the Columbia River.
Columbia River, not near the suspected jump zones.
No, quite a bit downstream, actually, near a place called Tino Bar. And he finds 3 bundles of cash. Partially buried, disintegrated, but clearly money.
Don't tell me.
Yep, the FBI confirms it. The serial numbers match the Cooper ransom money, about $5,800 in total.
Wow, finally a concrete link. But the Columbia River.
That became the new mystery. Did it wash all the way down from the Washougal River area, which feeds into the Columbia?
Seems plausible, maybe.
Plausible, but debated. Some analyses looking at how river currents work in the state of the Bills suggested maybe not. The rubber bands were surprisingly intact for having supposedly tumbled miles downriver for years.
What else?
There was analysis of microscopic diatoms, tiny algae found on the bills. It suggested the money might have entered the water much later than the hijacking, maybe only months before Brian Ingram found it.
So it wasn't just sitting there for 9 years.
That's one theory. Could it have been buried there deliberately much later? Or washed down gradually? It's still debated. It's the only bit of ransom money ever recovered.
What happened to the money Brian found?
After legal wrangling, it was eventually divided between Brian Ingram and Northwest Orient's insurance company.
Okay, so a piece of the money, but in a confusing location. What other physical evidence did they have? Anything from the plane itself?
Yes, a few potentially crucial items left behind on Cooper's seat 18E. Most famously, a black clip-on tie.
A tie. Did it tell them anything?
It had a mother-of-pearl tie clip. They traced the tie was sold exclusively at JCPenney stores, but only up until about 1968. Narrows it down slightly, maybe.
Any DNA?
Years later, in 2001, they managed to get a partial DNA profile from the tie, but no matches found in any database so far. It excluded some suspects, but didn't pinpoint Cooper.
Anything else on the tie?
This is where citizen scientists got involved. Using powerful microscopes, they found tiny particles embedded in the tie fibers, things like lycopodium spores, which are common but sometimes used in labs or manufacturing.
Okay.
And, more unusually, particles of pure, unalloyed titanium and also rare earth elements like cerium and strontium sulfide.
What does that suggest?
It points towards maybe industries involved in aerospace. Boeing was right there in Seattle, or maybe advanced chemical manufacturing or metal fabrication. It's intriguing, but not definitive proof of anything.
What else was found on the plane?
They found 8 Raleigh filter-tip cigarette butts in the ashtray near his seat.
Fingerprints? Saliva for DNA?
Unfortunately, no usable prints were lifted, and back then DNA testing wasn't what it is now. The butts were apparently later destroyed or lost. Same with a couple of hair strands, found one wasn't usable, the other got lost over time.
Frustrating. What about the parachutes? He took 2, left 2.
Right. 1 main parachute and 1 reserve chute were left on the plane in Reno. That unused main chute, an MD-6 model, is actually now in the Washington State Historical Society Museum.
A museum piece. And the chutes he took?
Well, here's another twist. One of the reserve parachutes they gave him was actually a non-functional training chute. Basically, a dummy sewn shut.
They gave him a fake parachute. Deliberately.
It seems it was unintentional, just scooped up in the rush for the skydiving school. But Cooper took it. It was never recovered.
So, did he know it was fake? Did he jump with a useless reserve?
More questions. It fuels speculation about how much he really knew about skydiving. If he was experienced, wouldn't he have checked his gear carefully?
You'd think so. Any other gear found later?
One small thing. Years later, in 1978, near Lake Merwin, in that original search area, a hunter found a placard, like an instruction sheet for lowering the aft air stairs of a 727.
From Flight 305?
Believed to be, yeah.
Tuh.
It likely blew off the staircase either during or after the jump. It's another small piece back near the initially suspected zone.
Okay, so we have a tie with weird particles, missing cigarette butts, some confusingly located money, a dummy parachute. It's a messy trail.
Very messy. Which leads us to theories and speculation. Let's talk about Cooper himself, the profile.
Right, the sketches the FBI released.
There were several composite sketches, actually, based on recollections from the crew, particularly Tina McLeod and Florence Schaffner. Composite A, Composite B, a later revised B.
Did the witnesses think they were accurate?
Opinions varied. Some thought one sketch was better than another. Memories fade and differ, you know. But generally, they painted a picture.
Which was?
Mid-40s, around 5'10",
Yep.
170, 180 pounds, olive complexion, dark hair, brown eyes. Importantly, no discernible accent when he spoke.
And personality. Background.
The FBI profile suggested someone intelligent, methodical, clearly planned this carefully, likely had some military background, maybe airborne, but perhaps not a regular sports skydiver.
Why not a sports skydiver?
The jump conditions were terrible night, storm, unknown terrain, inadequate gear like no helmet, jumping in loafers, and a business suit. Most experienced skydivers would consider that suicidal.
Makes sense. Well,
Familiarity with the Seattle area seemed likely. He knew about McCord Air Force Base nearby, mentioned it casually, probably in a desperate financial situation to attempt something so risky. And interestingly, though he ordered a bourbon and soda, he didn't seem like a heavy drinker. Sipped it slowly.
and the name, Dan Cooper. Any leads there?
One popular theory, never proven, is that it came from a French-language Belgian comic book series featuring a hero named Dan Cooper, a Canadian test pilot.
Could be a coincidence, or maybe a deliberate choice.
Exactly. Then there's his knowledge. That's a big piece of the puzzle.
You mentioned the aft stairs.
Right. Knowing the 727's aft stairs could be opened in flight wasn't common public knowledge.
How did he know?
Theories. Some speculate, maybe experience working for an airline or Boeing itself. The FBI even considered, though couldn't prove, a connection to clandestine CIA operations that sometimes use 727s modified for dropping agent or supplies out the back.
Wow, CIA involvement. That adds another layer.
It's speculation, but it addresses the knowledge gap. He also knew the right flap setting 15 degrees to request for slow, low-altitude flight suitable for a jump. He knew about refueling procedures. He picked the seat towards the back of the plane.
It all points to planning, but the parachute knowledge seems contradictory.
It really does. McLeod got the impression he knew what he was doing with the chutes, but then he takes the dummy reserve, jumps without a helmet. It's confusing. Maybe he was an Air Force loadmaster, familiar with planes and drops, but not a personal jumper. Another theory.
So the ultimate question, did he survive the jump?
That's the $1,000,000, well, $200,000 question, isn't it? The FBI's official stance for a long time was probably not.
Based on what?
The factors we mentioned. Lack of experience implied by some actions, the terrible weather, the freezing cold, landing in rugged wilderness at night, improper gear, no knowledge of the specific landing zone.
And the fact the money mostly never showed up.
That too. If he'd survived and gotten away clean, wouldn't he have spent some of that cash eventually, triggering the serial number alerts? It suggests maybe he died before he could.
But not everyone agrees.
No. Some investigators, even senior FBI agents involved later, felt he absolutely could have survived. People have survived worse jumps. Maybe he had help on the ground. Maybe he landed near civilization by sheer luck.
It's happened before, hijackers jumping and surviving.
Yes, Martin McNally, for instance, hijacked a plane later in '72, demanded money and parachutes, jumped out over Indiana, and survived, though he was caught later. It is possible.
So the FBI officially closed the active case when?
In July 2016, they suspended active investigation, citing the need to focus resources on other priorities. But they said they'd still review any specific physical evidence like the parachutes or the money if it ever turned up.
But they never caught him. Or found him.
Nope. It remains the only unsolved case of air piracy in the history of commercial aviation. And they did formally indict John Doe, a.k.a. Dan Cooper, back in 1976, just to keep the option open if he ever surfaced.
Okay, let's briefly touch on suspects. You said there were many.
Oh, hundreds over the years.
Yeah.
The list is incredibly long and varied. We really could do a whole separate deep dive just on them.
Give us a few highlights, maybe the more prominent ones.
Sure. There was a guy named Richard McCoy Jr. He pulled off a very similar hijacking just months after Cooper, also from a 727, got ransom money, parachuted out.
Sounds like a strong candidate.
He was definitely considered. But McCoy didn't quite match the physical description, and he denied being Cooper until his death. Plus, he made crucial mistakes Cooper didn't.
Okay, who else?
Kenneth Christensen, a former Northwest Orient Flight purser, also an Army paratrooper. Lived near Tacoma, knew the airline, matched some descriptions. His own brother suspected him. But again, no conclusive proof. DNA didn't match the tie sample.
Any others stand out?
Lynn Doyle Cooper, known as L.D. Cooper. His niece came forward years later, recalling strange things he said and did around Thanksgiving '71 about being injured. He apparently obsessed over the Dan Cooper comic books too. But again, DNA ruled him out based on the tie sample.
So many leads that just fizzle out.
Exactly. There was Robert Rackstraw, a Vietnam vet pilot with explosive training and a history of faking his own death. Lots of circumstantial connections featured in documentaries, but the FBI officially said he wasn't Cooper. Dwayne Weber made a supposed deathbed confession to his wife, "I'm Dan Cooper," but details didn't quite line up. Ted Braden, a Special Forces guy. The list goes on.
It's like everyone could be Cooper, but nobody is.
Precisely. Lots of intriguing stories, but no smoking gun connecting any single person definitively to that jump.
Okay, before we wrap up, you mentioned a unique situation, a fun fact almost.
Yeah, it's actually a really direct legacy of this whole event. Because Cooper jumped from the aft stairs, it highlighted a major security vulnerability.
Right, that they could be opened in flight.
Exactly. So Boeing and the FAA acted quickly. They developed a device specifically to prevent this from happening again.
What is it?
It's called a Cooper vane. It's a simple spring-loaded mechanical wedge on the outside of the fuselage that's pushed clear when the plane is on the ground, allowing the stairs to open. But once the plane is airborne, airflow pushes the vane into place, physically blocking the staircase from being lowered.
Named after him.
Yep. Every Boeing 727 built after the hijacking had it installed, and older ones were retrofitted. A direct physical legacy of D.B. Cooper on aircraft design.
That's fascinating. So his actions literally changed the plane.
Permanently. And beyond the vane, the hijacking had a huge immediate impact on airport security in general.
How so?
The major catalyst for measures we now take for granted. Mandatory baggage screening for all passengers started soon after. Increased scrutiny of people buying tickets with cash, especially one-way tickets. Metal detectors became much more common.
So we can thank Cooper, in a weird way, for modern airport security.
In part, yes. His crime forced a major rethink of how vulnerable planes were. And the fascination just endures, doesn't it?
It really does. Books, movies, documentaries. You mentioned CooperCon. Is that real?
Oh, yeah. An annual convention where enthusiasts gather, share theories, hear from investigators or authors. The cultural footprint is huge.
So summing up, this mystery just continues to captivate, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's the daring nature of it, the clean getaway if he made one, and this legacy that, as you said, even changed airplanes and security.
With the FBI case now inactive, it feels like the truth about Dan Cooper, or D.B. Cooper, is just out there, lost to time, maybe.
It really does feel that way. Elusive, like the man himself vanishing into the storm clouds.
And this deep dive, honestly, it feels like we've covered a lot, but I know there's even more detail out there.
Oh, for sure. Conflicting witness accounts, more obscure suspects, deeper dives into the evidence analysis. It's a rabbit hole you can fall down for days.
We definitely encourage folks to keep exploring if this grabbed them. What stands out most to you after all this time? What's the lingering question?
For me, beyond just who he was, it's the why and the how. Was it desperation, meticulous planning, sheer luck? Did he survive? And if so, how did he live the rest of his life? Those questions are almost more fascinating than just a name.
Yeah. And maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. What does the enduring nature of this mystery, our obsession with it, say about us?
That's a great point. Maybe it speaks to our fascination with the unknown, with unsolved puzzles, with the idea that someone can just vanish, pull off the impossible, and beat the system. It's a modern legend.
A perfect legend to explore here on Tell Me More Stories Told As podcast. Thank you so much for walking us through it.
My pleasure. It's an incredible story.
And thank you all for listening. Again, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the D.B. Cooper enigma, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next exploration.
There's always more to uncover.
We look forward to sharing more stories with you next time.